It is draft month. We've talked about receivers. We've talked about running back. We've talked about quarterback. But remember the tight end. It's me, Jagger, and I have Max Toscano with Reception Perception and his own Substack, Remember the Tight End. And we're giving you the top 10 rankings at tight end. Keep in mind, folks, this isn't fantasy. This is for NFL. So we're going to have some wild takes here. We know you're going to let us have your opinion in the comments and tell us how crazy we are, and we encourage it. We'll get us off right off the bat with the crazy one, the tight end one here. And to be fair, he's my tight end 3. He's your tight end 1. It's Eli Raritan from Notre Dame. I don't know where you're at with him. The blocking, he's the best traditional tight end. I don't know what that means anymore, but he does all the things that tight ends are supposed to do. So
Yeah, well, I mean, it means more than it did for the last 10 to 15 years. It's, um, we're at a point where defenses are no longer inherently oriented around the run. So offenses for years were able to just push out as many pass catchers onto the field as possible without really considering any of the rest of it, and were able to just gain matchups because there were these rules that defenses followed about how they constructed themselves with how they put guys on the field, how they answered different personnel packages, how they defended run first, and just everything was oriented around these ways of doing things that were built in a league that was run first forever, for as long as the games existed. And so when that really fully changed and offenses stopped worrying about eating their vegetables and getting a fullback and a tight end on the field and presenting that run, defenses were able to commit to space. And once defenses started committing to space and the dynamic flipped, what you need from all of these positions changed. And all of a sudden, on both sides of the ball, these positions that are involved in both the run game and the pass game suddenly reorient their fundamentals around what they actually need. So the tight end position it really only exists because you want a guy who can block like an offensive lineman and catch the ball. But the fact of the matter is, like, if they go too far in either direction without the other, they're going to render themselves completely obsolete because of the other extreme, right? Like, if there's a guy that's just out there to win matchups and catch the ball, but he can't do the fundamental things about his position, then there's just nothing separating them from a worse version of that other guy. And so you're seeing that with a lot of the power slots now and the 6-0 line stuff. So all of a sudden, um, that matters a ton. And receiving in a vacuum isn't that important. Blocking in a vacuum isn't that important. It's kind of the sliding scale of those two things and your ability to seriously occupy your position and actually execute the fundamentals.
yeah, that's kind of where I'm at. I know. And to break it down to just the simplest form, like to keep it simple, stupid, and not to talk down to anyone out there when I use that term, but particularly how I like to break things down and how I grade things is like this type of blocking is one thing. Like, can they chip block? Can they run and pass block are two different things. I know that's crazy, but those should be graded differently. And then when you think about the receiving aspect, breaking it down to its baser forms, are they just fast downfield? That matters. Can they catch away from their body? Are they someone who are earning targets on their own? That something is, to me, makes an entire grade of a whole. And what I'm basically trying to say is Eli Raritan, when you look at it, and it's particularly all of his grades, he's like green and almost everything and blue in a lot of other things, to where it's like you said, we're playing like positionless basketball now, kind of with football, but at the same time, when you have the tight end position, if you can't block, it's like, are you? And I think that Jacob Sanderson, who's someone I disagree with a lot, but some of his words that he gave to me about someone he was actually wrong about, Harold Fannin, and I just kind of want to flex a little bit on that. But it was that, are you better than a slot wide receiver, or are you at least a good enough blocker? And then when you have this weird tweener thing, what you have is like a Mike Gesicki. It's like, what does he do for you really? So that's how someone like Raritan really stacks up. What are some of your fits that you like, and how early could you see him going?
I mean, the medicals are gonna be the big determinant about where he goes, and I think that that's kind of a big thing that, from a team perspective, is probably the only hang up I think they would maybe have. I think where he actually goes, I don't really know. I mean, I know where I would take him, but it's totally different. So I think he'll probably go in, like, to split the difference there, probably somewhere in the 3rd, uh, or, like, late 3rd, potentially early 4th. I don't think he'll last beyond that, but I don't think he'll necessarily go earlier than middle of day 2 on the extreme end. So, personally, I think there's a ton of value there. Um, but yeah, I mean, that's really exactly like you said, like, it's positionless basketball, but the positionless element sort of has this unstated assumption of fundamentals, right? Like, you can't have, the centers who shoot are great, but you can't just put a 6'6" guy at center and say we have because he's a great shooter, Like, that's just not how that works.
Yeah,
And
it
that's
that
and that's
yeah,
sort of
that's actually a great analogy to stay on theme.
right, and sort of that's sort of the idea with tight end is that, like, you still have to be you have to be a center that can do stuff, that can do other stuff instead of just being a guy that can do other stuff. Because then it's just like, then then you're not getting matched up with the other team's big guy, and you're not able to actually stretch the floor credibly because they're just gonna switch you onto a guard, or they're just gonna match you with a guard. And so that's where we're getting to in the NFL, where all these positional labels and how that determines how defenses match up are going away, and it's really about what skill sets you have. Like, teams will match different tight ends differently in 12 personnel. If you look at any Ravens game when Isaiah Likely is the second tight end, because they'll at least on standard downs, and on third down when it's just passing, that's a whole separate thing. But on standard downs, you'll see that when Isaiah Likely is the second tight end, and they'll always usually pair either Ricard or Kohler with one of their 2 flex guys, because they're a heavy, heavy 12 personnel team because of the run game. When it's Likely or Andrews, they're gonna be in nickel, and when it's the other of Ricard and Kohler, and they have both those big guys out there, it's gonna be base. And so you're just gonna start seeing people match skill sets rather than positions.
Mhm, mhm. Makes a lot of sense to me. Now for the fantasy aspect of him, I actually do think that he's I was just on Trade Addicts, old but gold classic podcast that I always go on. And that was just to talk dynasty with them. And I got asked, who are your rookie third and fourth round sleepers that you want? And I said, well, I'm a draft guy now, so my real answer is there are no sleepers, guys. It's like nobody get rid of those picks into something else. But obviously that's not the answer for everyone. Eli Raritan's someone that I feel like only guys like you and I really like because we see the vision. It's a lot of people like when we talk about Stowers and Sadiq here next, they're gonna be really excited for them because of the real tangible things like athleticism, speed, metrics, and don't get me wrong, production with Stowers, which we'll talk about later, but the things that just make you a good football player. And that's why it's so hard sometimes to project things like production from college to NFL. Often they get overlooked by people that aren't looking at from like an NFL lens and just from like a pure fantasy lens, which is a good segue. Kenyon Sadiq averaged out into our tight end too. And to give you guys an idea of how I usually do this is I bring a guest on, or if it's me, Garrett, and Andrew, I give them a spreadsheet. I say number all these guys, and then I have the spreadsheet give the average, and then that's the ranking. It's called a composite score. So once we get that composite ranking down, then I go. Well, me and Max have pretty well, one, Max is like deeper in the trenches on tight end than I am. So we have some pretty differing things. With that being said, Kenyon Sadiq is my tight end 2. He is your tight end 4. That's still pretty generous considering that this is one of the deeper tight end classes that I've ever scouted. I don't know about you as well. We almost kind of talked about some stuff pre-show to where I think Kenyon Sadiq is getting overrated. Do I think he's worth a first round pick for an NFL team? I would say that's relative to how the team is going to use him. with that being said, I think he is a solid blocker, very versatile, and he is athletic, and that is one of the metrics that translates to production in the NFL. But you say a lot of his stuff is like kind of funny money, and you told me that pre-show, so let's start there and expand on that.
Yeah, well, I mean, like, the problem I have with all this is that it's we kind of agreed upon it from a public collective perspective in August, right? Like, I think we all he wasn't the only guy. I think he certainly didn't have this ironed out consensus the way that he does now, but he was a pretty popular, and I would say the closest thing to consensus tight end one in August. But he was, I mean, he'd never really done anything yet. And I think we just never moved off that because we know he was fat. We know he's fast. We know he's and a high level testing athlete, right? He was on the freaks list. That was obviously pretty validated when he got to Indy with his unbelievable speed, and not just that, just everything else that he did was great. Was great too. But it's I kind of think that we're filling in the blanks a lot with what we imagine will be there with such a player who is such a talented athlete, because like a lot of the things that limit him don't necessarily show up in testing. For instance, as a pure route runner, he does not have the precision, balance, and hip flexibility that you need to be able to consistently beat man coverage. And he was one of the first guys I charted with reception perception. And, the man coverage stuff it bears that out. And now they barely faced it, which partially that's, schedule and the types of teams that they played. Like, it's not necessarily like a, strength of schedule thing, but just a who they ended up matched up with. But also just the fact that, like teams play offenses that are built that way a lot with zones and emptier boxes because they're so spread out generally. The man coverage stuff is rough. It's pretty rough. He's pretty stiff and inefficient in and out of breaks. He rounds stuff off. And part of that is because of how fast he does move. And that means you have, there's more momentum to decelerate, but he really struggles to do it. And so at that point, you're not really thinking about this high end matchup guy really at all. You're talking more about like a Tucker Kraft type who, and Tucker Kraft's a great player, but all he really does in the passing game, and he does this a lot, but it's the same kind of buttons, is stretch the second level on play action where you can just get behind guys and be athletic because they're sucked up into the run defense and can't recover on his speed. Slide into the flat on movement and catch checkdowns and create after the catch. He's not exactly fluid and precise enough to be a consistent answer against man coverage. And so he does that, and he does that to big numbers, but they put him in 3 wide receiver sets a whole bunch as the tight end because he is such a dominant force on the line of scrimmage in the run game. So he only really needs to be that. He only needs to really play that role. And now they can keep hitting it over and over and over because of how they built their offense and how good he is. But Sadiq is 20 pounds lighter than Tucker Kraft is. And as much as his effort as a blocker is fantastic, and his production as a blocker is pretty good too. He charted out well for me. But there's the size and indicators on tape, I think, where he is getting controlled a little bit to the point where, like, I'm worried about the translation there. I think he can get to a serviceable level, like a baseline level. Like, you think about TJ Hawkinson or Sam Laporta just to play that inline role credibly, but he doesn't do what those guys do as matchup winners and man coverage beaters. And, it's just gonna be hard for him to command volume. And at that point, you'd probably want a better blocker in that situation. So I talked earlier about the sliding scale of all of these things, and the sliders just don't necessarily line up for him to be this slam dunk prospect. Now he has a lot, obviously, I think he has a lot of upside because he is such a freak, and maybe he gets to a slightly better than that level as a blocker just by physical maturity because he is young. But all that is pretty hypothetical. And I think that like there's just there are players that are more productive than him in this class. There are players that are bigger than him in this class. There are players that are more athletic than him in this class per relative athletic score that at bigger sizes. And it's just like some of those guys are multiple of those things too. And so at that point, it's just like the only thing you are that makes you this consensus guy is fast. And other guys have been fast. And it's just in isolation, it just doesn't really mean that much.
For me, it and I kind of mean this literally and like fuck figuratively. I think he's going to be Xavier worthy. And I mean that for fantasy. I mean that for real life. I mean that in every sense of the comp. Where if I have to comp Kenyon Sadiq to anybody that's not just a literal another tight end, like blocking Vernon Davis, fast Jonnu Smith, it's Xavier Worthy because I think he's going to be better as for a team for a specific reason than he is for what everyone else thinks he's going to be, right? Because when you see Xavier Ward, they're like, oh, the Chiefs traded up to go get this guy who's the fastest dude in combine history. This is going to be Tyreek Hill 2.0. We're looking at someone who could get 1,500 yards every year, earn 100 receptions, just be the man in Kansas City. And that hasn't happened at all. And his usage is more of like a gadget guy to where he's stretching defenses downfield. He's to quote Matt Harmon, I won't call him a sacrificial X just because you want him trying to win those deep, but he's more of a clear out guy than almost anybody. And his NFL purpose is great. And of course you got the gadget plays, the rushing and all that. It's not great as far as being like the guy, being the wide receiver one. And to keep using the basketball metaphors, he isn't like the Steph Curry, rangy guy that's going to be scoring deep all the time that we thought he was going to be. And I think Kenyon Sadiq's going to be the same thing. He can challenge defenses deep with speed, but he's much more useful as like an H-back. And like you said, closer to the line of scrimmage to where right now you have a fancy Jonnu Smith. So I do think in the right system, you could get the most out of him, but he's a little bit more team and scheme dependent than this guy's going to come in right away and just be a slam dunk.
Yeah, I mean, that's just yeah, there's just so much there that's just not actualized, and that's kind of in so many ways why I want to see him take another year and a lot, and you can't justify that because of his draft position, but from purely developmental perspective, I think that would have been nice. I don't think it's necessary because it's not quarterback where you can really get ruined just by the speed of the game. You can get ruined by bad development, but yeah, I mean, we're gonna have to see it. I just don't think that it's the slam dunk that I think we're all talking about because I think we're filling in a lot of blanks that aren't filled in.
Which we can go to our next one here, which is kind of and for you, I feel like same but different. But I feel like we're gonna fight here. It's Eli Stowers. He's my tight end one. You're tight end six. Now we hear buzz that a lot of people view him as a wide receiver. What do you I guess break down how do you see Eli Stowers in the NFL? Do you even see him being successful, or do you think that his usage from like a team scheme standpoint is what's going to really determine his career?
Yeah, I mean, I think that the only way he's ever going to have a consistent every down role is if he does actually slim down and make that move. And I think that we've seen enough in his athletic profile that it's possible. And the fact that he's never really like he's so new to route running and catching the ball in general. So there's no like a lot of guys that are at tight end, if they could play wide receiver would have already. But that's not the case here. So we don't really have that data point that says it can't really happen, which is nice. I think like if you try to make him into because he's 6'4", he's 239 right now. That's not big enough to play true tight end, just at least on first and second downs. It isn't. And then the matchups change when you're moved into that flex role because you're getting DBs if teams decide to answer with nickel, which they will go more and more going forward. So, I think I think he's pretty close to that line as it is right now, where like I think in a couple years, even as a tight end at 239, he can potentially kind of go between the slot, which is and tight end, which is so rare because at least at a serious level, like there are so many guys people say that about, but you wouldn't do it for more than a handful of snaps just because they can't actually do it. I think he could potentially get close, but I think you're not really gonna have there's no difference as a blocker between somebody that's like this, who isn't blocking in line and is just getting in the way on this of second level guys, and somebody who's doing that at 220 pounds. Because blocking off the ball versus on the line of scrimmage on a D end head up is really just about effort and getting in the way, whereas blocking on the line is a lot about strength and technique and real barriers to entry. So I think they might as well just kind of do it just because I think he would move more fluidly at 220 and be that true slot guy because he does have such an elite feel for zones. And I do think obviously he's fast. He's got a great frame and he catches the ball well in traffic. Um, like I can almost see him being like a huge Jarvis Landry, maybe with a little bit less vertical juice. But well, I mean Jarvis Landry didn't have any vertical juice, but like a little bit less pure quickness, but not that much. Um, so almost kind of like a big Jawan Jennings in a lot of ways. That's what I see him as because I do think he is such a freak by tight end standards in a way that is more real than the way Kenyon Sadiq is a freak because I do think he has better maneuverability, better hips. I think he does a better job getting off of man coverage. He's more fluid. He's quicker. Well, he's not quicker, but he's just a little bit more sudden in and out of cuts. So I think it might be a real thing. I think it might be a real thing.
Yeah, because my argument is he's only played tight end for 2 years. Um, he had he commanded crazy targets in 2024. He basically was the Vanderbilt offense. 2025, that pressure was eased off of him because of say what you want. Diego Pavia was just gave them really good college QB play for what that's worth. And what if he was 245? Like you're talking about getting him all the way 220. What and this is kind of where I say like the wide receiver thing. Well, if he was 1 inch taller, people would like him. Or if he was like a half a second faster in a 40, he would be that much better. If he was 245, would that change anything for you about him being like an effective F tight end, remove tight end? You know?
Well, I mean, I think he's an effective F tight end now. I mean, there's also F receivers. That's the thing people
Mm-hmm.
don't. When you look at these positions in isolation, that's not really how. That is how GMs are looking at it in a lot of ways, unfortunately. But that's not how offensive coordinators are looking at it when it comes to calling plays and deciding who they deploy. So there are F receivers. There are guys that do 90% of the move blocking stuff that a move tight end does. And if you don't have just a second serious big body in that move role, the defense doesn't have to because you can put that guy on the line of scrimmage too. You can always have two inline tight ends on the line of scrimmage. And so if the guy can't do that, then it's not really that different from just this because there's really two blocking roles for these guys, right? There's the on ball inline stuff where you're on a defensive end, and then there's the off ball move stuff where you're climbing to support. The only time you're touching defensive ends is with, angles and assistance. And so receivers do a lot of that now. And you're bumping into this opportunity cost where you're sacrificing the fundamental of that position, which is, the maneuverability and the nimbleness and the movement, which is better in a guy that's 210, 6'2", 210, and all he has to do is dig out of safety and get in his face and get in the way because all the fundamental on the line of scrimmage blocking is done by the O-line and tight end. So those positions blend together. And I think Stowers is good at that now, but he's not he's close, but because he's the certain size that he is now, I think he doesn't have quite the level of suddenness that good F slot receivers have. So if he were 245 and stronger, then I think he could play in line serviceably and be like, Sam Laporta or somebody like that. But that's just not really the reality here. Like he's bulked up to this. And I don't think that I just don't think that there's more in the other direction necessarily. And maybe there is, but I mean, he's not young either.
Was he 25? I think
I don't think he's 25, but he's like 23 or 24.
then I think he can put 6 pounds on. Even like, granted, you can't MCU diet him because half the MCU diet is like juice, gear. But it just like to me, like that 6 pound swing. I guess to me, you look at the positives, and I know that Chris Ballard isn't the guy that you want to take advice from anybody, from everybody, but he does take swings, and I do like his method. That's helped me a lot, where he said we focus on so much what he can't do that we don't think so much of what he can do and try to develop that. And I think that's where I'm at with Stowers. And I guess the upside is I swing a little harder for guys that are productive than not, because Harold Fannin, that was the same thing that came out. Is like he was a small school guy. B, he just wasn't a good blocker. I think Stowers is a better blocker than Fannin was at times. I think Stowers is a better blocker than Evan Ingram is, which is a good comp in my opinion, because Evan Ingram has never been a willing or good blocker. Sometimes I wonder if Evan Ingram's just been such a good receiver that he's existed despite himself. Because I'm like, dude, he's a borderline liability. He's like the Tobias Harris of like tight ends. I'm like, how does this dude keep getting bags?
No, I know. I mean, and it's just like everybody thinks that they can game the game the system and have this like a wide receiver at tight end. It's like, then if you really think that, do it. Put a wide receiver there. Do it. Like, I'm serious. Like,
Yeah.
if if you are all about, oh, we're gonna get this matchup guy, it's like, oh, he can do enough as a blocker. Go put Jawan Jennings there. Put him at tight end.
Mhm.
You're not gonna do it.
It,
Not gonna do it.
it he's Tobias Harris, and this type of player makes Tobias Funke's, where they're just like, like, no, these people delude themselves. And I think
Yeah,
it'll work,
yeah.
but
It
maybe
might
it'll
work,
work
yeah,
for
but it might work for us.
yeah.
I
That's
mean,
how I
you
feel.
can't call it that.
Hmm. All right, we got those are some of the exciting ones. We're gonna go to I I think some of these guys are exciting, but for you guys that are just fantasy nerds, they might be a little bit less exciting. Before we go, make sure to hit that like, subscribe button. More importantly, if you want to look at tape, we have all of it available for you at Dynasty Nerds. All of this is condensed down to where you can look at every snap from every one of these tight ends. Mostly, some of these are deep cuts, thanks to Max. And more importantly, you get to be a part of our Dynasty Nerds community. You get to maybe join our app leagues. We have all kinds of tools, but particularly our GM tool if you are in a dynasty. But again, if you're just a draft guy, just support us over here. And of course, if you have any disagreements, make sure to leave those in the comments. We may or may not respond to them. And we'll hop back into it. Sam Roush, tight end, Stanford. I have like a list of top 5, that I need to get to this week. He's at the top. I've looked at like broadcast Twitter highlights, like not the real stuff, anything but Just Bombs Productions. This is the only thing I haven't seen of him. You are a big fan of him. He's your tight end 3. He's my tight end 4 as of right now, just from what I've saw. I haven't actually put a grade on him. So I'm gonna let you give the sales pitch for Sam Roush.
Yeah, I mean, he's 267 pounds. He's the strongest tight end in his class on the line of scrimmage in a vacuum by a lot. Not just because of that size, but because he's genuinely strong. He is an elite pass protector as well, like elite, one of the best I've ever seen in college, which doesn't matter as much as the run blocking, but it just gives you an idea of what kind of skill set and physicality and size that he has and technique. Um, and all of that, he's somewhat productive in an offense that could not throw the ball forward, and is one of the most athletic tight ends of all time, adjusted for size per RAS. So that is a pretty complete package to me. Now, the only issue I have, and one thing that stops him from being a contender for tight end 1, is that he does have impossibly short arms, like comedically short arms, like 30 inches, which doesn't make any, which it's an inch shorter than Tyler Warren, who we were all like worried about with arm length. Like, it's like Ruben Bain territory. Um, and for him, you can kinda see it on tape a fair bit where he's not really gaining control of guys and is just so strong that he can survive being yanked around a little bit, almost like a bull rider. Like, those guys aren't in control of the situation, but they're hanging on and they're anchoring because they are just, they're good at it. In his case, like, he's just stronger than the guy that he's opposite, and so if he's able to overcome that arm length and get in on you, he's gonna he's like, you see him really blow guys off the ball. But, so I worry a little bit about translation, not as far as whether or not he'll be a solid to good blocker, because I think he will be. It's whether or not he'll be an elite one, and so I think we're at, like, well, I don't think he's certain well, I certainly do think he's a solid receiver, I don't think he's necessarily much more than somebody who is doing that, wide tight end stuff that's complementary to the receivers, right? The detaching on play action, the catch and check downs, the, off chips and releases, the occasionally working into the seam or settling underneath in some quick game, right? Like, you're not really out there separating against man coverage or, or flexing out and making plays in the meat of your passing game, but you're a really useful option. But I think for him to be tight end one with that, you need to be like, you need to be an elite NFL blocker. And I think the skill set's there, just the arms make that, make me wonder if he's just going to be good. And at that point, like, that's not tough to justify, but it's tough to justify relative to people that you think might be better.
Yeah, cause like, I'll be honest, like, now I think I got him too high just because, like, that sounds like day 3 to me, because if you're essentially gonna pay that much for a high-end blocker and he's limited as a receiver. Granted, again, with a lot of things with tight end, we're hearing buzz now that they're shopping in at colleges again. They're like, "Hey, man, you just lost the Sweet 16. Do you wanna come play tight end for us?" Like, we're seeing, like, buzz for that now to where, like, I wonder, like, how much is he actually gonna cost? And like, and I'm not saying that, like, he won't have a productive career, and that's relative because of what kind of tight end he is. But like, is he gonna be like the best Charlie Collar of all time? Is he gonna be like young Mercedes? Is he gonna be young old Mercedes Lewis, where Mercedes Lewis was basically playing tackle for 5 years, but he's like
Yeah.
1,000 years old, you know? So
Yeah, I mean, like, I think that's where you start to look at the fact that he is actually really fluid. He does have some quick feet to him, so I think he could be a useful underneath target. But like from a pure upside perspective, he could be huge Dalton Schultz. I mean that's kind of lazy because they wear the same number. They both went to Stanford, but just a guy that really works the underneath well and is an answer there and can help you move the chains a little bit on third down against zone teams. But I mean, you look at this athleticism. Maybe he's a guy that can actually be really difficult to cover for safeties at 267 pounds. If he develops maybe a little bit as a route runner. So there's there's enough upside there that you could potentially have a guy who is a dominant tackle who is also like your number 4, well, not number 4 receiver, but like is a guy that gives you 600 to 800 yards and answers to a lot of different things as a compliment. And so from a receiver perspective, that's just, that starts to get into where we talk about like limited as a receiver. But if you flip the dynamic and look at how much people are paying guys like John Bates, Charlie Kohler now because they don't have guys that can block in line. If you can get one of those guys that does a solid enough amount as a receiver, you can put them with 3 receivers on the field. And because you have that guy, you're able to still run the ball at a solid enough level. And you can do a lot of that. And then you have 3 receivers to do that. And your 4th guy is an offensive lineman. And so that starts to give you a lot of surplus value. So that's sort of where I think about these things as far as tight ends go. And I think why that relative quote unquote limitation as a receiver sometimes is like is okay just because of what they are.
which is a good segue into another guy where I just need you to sell me on him because like I honestly had to rank him just so we could talk about him because I don't have a lot of interest in him in an NFL perspective and anything. It's Oscar Delt from Georgia. And you're saying that I'm crazy now that a lot of people are a lot of more people are higher on him. He's your tight end too. He's tight end 7 for me. How am I wrong?
Um, well, I mean, you may not be. Like, it really does depend on how much you value production. I think that obviously anybody with low production is an outlier, right? And I typically am against betting on outliers just in anything, but I think if you can come up with an explanation for it, which you can in this case, I'm all for it just because this isn't receiver necessarily where, um, it's just a little bit more sensitive to the production is a little bit more sensitive here to the things around him, especially at the college level. Um, and that Georgia offense is just like it's tough. Because they're so limited in the true pass game, it's so much it's screens and run game. It's like a high school offense in a lot of ways. And when they do throw the ball downfield or when they get into the real drop back stuff, like it's simple, quick game or heavy protection play action. And it helps the guy they leave in the protection because he's the only guy on their team at tight end that can block in the pass game at least. And he's a really, really good pass protector, just like Roush. So you start to lose ability to target him. And at that point, it's really just like you have to scheme up run action stuff for him because you can't really get to much in the true dropback game. If you look at him on tape, at least to me, this guy's open all the time. The guy's so consistently open. He's so athletic. He maybe doesn't have the wiggle to be an elite man coverage beater on like a whole bunch of routes, but like, and that's just relative. I mean, like comparing him to guys like Hawkinson or Laporta, like the elite man coverage beaters at tight end. Um, I think that's the one thing I would draw back from him on, but he's open constantly. He's open constantly, and he either doesn't get the ball when he's in the progression, he doesn't get the ball, or he's just kind of running decoy stuff and looks really, really good doing it, or the ball just doesn't get to him. Um, he's I really think that if you put him in a situation where that was more conducive to targeting the tight end, he would easily be able to give you 600 yards in a college offense last year. It's just that it was just so hostile for the last 3 years to getting him the ball. Um, again, he's open all the time. He's open all the time, and his charting is going to be out soon for reception perception. It's like it's what I've seen from him on tape for 3 years now. Like the guy's open.
And you mentioned his pro day. I didn't see anything on during that. Like, I'm assuming he did a 40, whatnot. Like, you got any measurables on him?
Yeah, I mean, he ran between, depending on who you ask, between a 4.48 and a 4.52. He's 6'5", 245. He's a 3-year starter. Yeah, I mean, the guy's and it all shows up on tape. Like the guy's an explosive athlete. The blocking is less good than I would like for a guy that's going to play the Y like he is. But I think a lot of that is just, I think he's got to get a little bit more consistent with his hands. I don't think he'll ever be like an elite blocker just because I think he's a little slight at that 245 at 6'5". Um, I think he'll be good. His effort level is really good and his feet are good. So I think if he fixes his hands a little bit, he can be solid. And then he's a chunk creator and I think occasional matchup winner for big plays against safeties just because of how explosive he is as a mover. He's somebody that I think can really give you a lot of chunk creation if you really know how to target him.
Yeah, I'd have to really re-weight my grade, but I want to weight it a lot more towards like now that I've made all my grading for offensive linemen and whatnot, break down the blocking, like the things that you said, like why is he a bad blocker? Does he have shitty feet? Does he like patty cake with his hands or no punch with his hands, stuff like that? Or like on the other side of the ball, like D tackle, like Peter Woods stands straight up every snap, shit like that. Those are the things that I think, because like I actually compare reception perception and what I do separately because I was like, reception perception says, here's what they do, here's if they're getting open and how they're winning. I like to break down how they win, how they do well, and that's even on the fundamental. It's just like, what is this player doing with their hands when they position them? And someone like Oscar Delp, from this conversation, I'm moving him ahead of Sam Roush as far as like guys that I need to get on and grade and look at. Next is someone I've been kind of low on. I know Andrew Mott around here likes Max Clare a lot. The Purdue tape is much better than Ohio State, just not a lot on that tape. So that I didn't think he was bad. I just thought he was like underwhelming. Where are you at? Because this is the only one we kind of graded the same. We both have him at tight end 5.
I don't really know what to do with him, to be honest. Like,
That's where I'm at.
he needed another year.
Mm,
He needed another year. I mean, the Purdue tape is obviously really, really good. He's really productive too. Like all the not just standard ways, but all the stuff that people really like for projecting who's going to command volume, of stuff that all the fantasy guys use. They like him. I think the inline blocking at Purdue is actually not as bad as I had expected,
mhm,
which tells me that like as he kind of grows up, there's potential to be really solid there, or at least serviceable for what he is. Like again, back to the Sam Laporta, TJ Hawkinson kind of baseline of credibility in line. Uh, I think he could get there. I saw enough flashes of that at Purdue where to imagine maybe with a little bit more weight and a little bit more age that he can do that.
mhm,
Um, and we obviously saw the kind of matchup nightmare that he is. He's fluid, he's twitchy, he's explosive. He's he's got good route technique. He gets open. He's fast. At least at Purdue. Um, but it just kind of wasn't the same this past year, and it wasn't. And I don't just mean that statistically. I mean like he wasn't quite as he wasn't quite as you know elusive and twitchy as a route runner, and he wasn't. Guys stuck to him a little bit more than they did previously, and he was a good man coverage beater at Purdue. We didn't really see that at Ohio State. And again, I don't just mean in terms of the plays he got the ball on, I mean, like, what it looked like on tape. And look, they didn't use him as an inline blocker at all because they had Merrick, which I guess I understand, but, like, it just made his role kinda weird. Um, but even then, like, you kinda can't blame him, he just didn't look the same athletically. So I'm wondering if he was hurt or if he put on that, because I do think he put on a little bit of weight between his last year at Purdue and this year at Ohio State, and if that little bit of weight sats his athleticism, like,
it's not
that
good.
becomes that's not good. So I don't know what the answer is there. That's why I wanted to see him come back for another year and see if he could put those 2 things together. Um, I don't really know what to do with him. I think that we've seen it, like, if in the frame he is now with how with the foundations he showed as a blocker, I think, at Purdue. Again, he doesn't have to be good, he just has to be good enough that he can credibly play in line, which is a high bar because a lot of guys don't get there. Like the Evan Ingrams of the world don't touch that. You'll
Mhm.
never put them on at the end, unless they're splitting or cracking or something assisted. So you just need to clear that bar, and I think he could do that, but, like, I don't know if he could do it. It's sort of similar to the Sadiq thing where I don't know if he could do it at that size, but, like, I don't wanna I think he has more route running talent and deceleration than Sadiq, but, like, if you can't do it at the weight you need to do it, um, but you aren't special in the other ways at the weight you need to do that, then you're just kind of an okay inline blocker. You're just kind of, like, okay at everything. So I don't know what to do, right? Like, it could be any one of these things. We need more information.
Yeah.
Oh. you know?
he's up for me just for the upside alone as a receiver, but
Right.
he's in Mike Gesicki territory for me, man, because it's the same thing. It's like, man, he runs route, he's athletic, what? But it's like he's not quite as good as a slot, and he can't block. So like, why not?
Yeah, but, like, that's the thing is, like, there are flashes to me at Purdue from a developmental perspective that says in, like, 3 years with the right if he goes to the right place, the way Sam Laporta did, and he went to the perfect place, maybe you can get there. It's not necessarily like a Fannin or Stowers to me where I just don't physically think they'll be able to do it. But to your point, you know, like, to your point, if he can't get to the weight, then he's stuck in that tweener area.
the unfortunate spot. It's like a like Death Valley, like there's where you could either just be a useful blocker, like you could be a Charlie Collar, or you could be um I will give Evan Ingram credit, like just a really good receiver when he does it, but he's kind of like that empty calorie. It's why I say Tobias Harris. Tobias Harris
Yeah,
is a great rebounder and scorer, but he's going to give up about like 30 points every game, so they just end up being empty calories. And that's what I worry
right.
about Claire. Another one, I don't know anything about him at all. And that's when I got to add like a lot of these guys that we're talking about now, they're at the back end because like I look at a lot of defensive players, stuff like that too. And that's been particularly deep this year. But Daquan Wright of Ole Miss, what's your sales pitch for him?
Um, yeah, I mean, uh, I think he's just I think he's a starter. I think he's just a guy that, like, remember, we're talking about these guys that can block in line, but can do more than an offensive lineman, right? That's the other end of the wide receiver test there. Um, I think he can do that. Is he gonna be a guy that gets paid top of market? No, but I think he's a guy that can sit on the line of scrimmage for you on first and second down, give you that requirement at a pretty high level, and, and detach from the line on play action, and settle into the underneath zones and give you that 4th guy in the passing game, that 4th complementary guy. But I think where he gives you a little bit not more than that, but where he excels in that capacity is that he's insane after the catch. It's crazy. It makes no it makes no sense. Well, it makes some sense given the rest of his profile because he really is so much of a just a raw linear mover, but like eh, his explosive plays are not like 20 yards. Like this guy takes a flat and takes it for 40. This guy takes, he catches a sail for 15 yards and then bursts through a hole and then goes for 35. It's it the highlights are wild. Um, the substance as a receiver, as a pure volume receiver who gives you answers against man coverage, that isn't there. It's just not there. But as a guy who can think about it this way, right? Like if you have a 6 offensive lineman that can work in the underneath zones, house a check down potentially, and get behind the linebackers on play action. That's pretty sick. It's it's not quite Tucker Craft territory because that's what Tucker Craft basically is, and that's why he's so good. That's why he's such an elite player. But but it's like that minus because he isn't quite the same level, I think, of quickness and elusivity in the short area. But like he's he's like trying to think of a good like he's kind of like Charlie Cole. Well, he's not as big, but he's kind of like that if he were good for like 3 catches for 60 yards.
Mm. Yeah, that's like because at first you described Tucker Craft to me, and then like you just like I felt like you were talking yourself down there or talking him down there. I was like, oh, that's not so bad because it's like cool that he has good yak, but it sounds like getting to the point to get to the yak is where all the problems are.
Yeah, yeah. Um, yeah, it's but like that's not really your job. That's kind of the receiver's job at the end of the day in your
Hmm.
passing game. Um, and Your job is to block in line and do more than an offensive lineman detaching, and he can do that. He'll never be a top of market guy. He's not a first round pick. He'll never be a superstar. But when you look at the tight end market and what is required now with these guys that are getting $8 million just to block in line and do nothing else, he does other stuff. Like he does more than just that.
Noted.
Even if he isn't one of your buttons in the volume passing game.
Noted. We'll move on to our next one. Jack Andrees from Texas. He's 6 for me. I liked his early tape, and I told you pre-show for him. He's one where I saw his early games. I need to see the back half. But honestly, I felt the exact same about what I saw from Jack Andrees as I did from Gunnar Helm. And he had a little bit more speed than Gunnar Helm did. So I'm surprised that you have him here this low. Is it blocking that's an issue or what?
Um, I mean, yeah, I think so far. He was heavier than I thought though at the combine. I thought he was going to come in like, low 240s like Dalton Kincaid did, and Dalton Kincaid didn't test, by the way. So like, he really plays at like 230. He's tiny.
Mhm.
Andrews is not that. Andrews is not that. He's bigger. And I remember watching him at Cal, thinking that there was kind of a lot of Dalton Kincaid to his game, where he's not necessarily quite twitchy and athletic enough to be an elite flex receiver, but like as a as far as tight ends go, he's really he's really good. When you get him matched up on those safeties and linebackers, he can beat you. And now on standard downs, that you can't do that, like we said, with because you get into Tobias Harris territory, which is why
Mhm.
Dalton Kincaid really only plays in obvious passing situations. But so I thought injuries could potentially be that guy. But when he came in at 245, like, yeah, there are issues as a blocker, but like maybe the raw strength is in there to get him to a serviceable, once again, the TJ Hawkinson, Sam Laporta baseline, who are those guys also kind of weigh that. Um, where like if he just gets there, all of a sudden you have like a legitimate matchup issue and a guy who can beat man coverage and settle into zones and be a volume guy. Kind of like not quite. I don't think he has the same juice as Laporta, but sort of like almost like a Laporta minus, not like a big minus either, like an 80% of Sam Laporta, 85% of that, but in a way that doesn't disqualify him from his position necessarily. That's what I see for him as the upside. And that's pretty high upside. Like there aren't a lot of those guys running around. And I think he was hurt this past year at Texas on and off. He definitely looked more fluid and athletic at Cal. But yeah, I mean, his Cal tape is like, as a route runner, is really, really good. So I mean, there's definitely some upside here, and I think if not, like he'll be like I think could potentially be like Kincaid in that he's maybe not quite as good, but is a really useful third down only guy. Like there's this rising kind of group, not group, but like delineation of tight end where these guys just play on third downs and work on those safeties and linebackers and do just enough in pass protection where they aren't a fourth receiver because that isn't quite as physically demanding as the run game role is because they're not the tackles are the ones blocking the D ends in the passing game, unlike the running game where the tight end has to do it. So that's sort of the bull case for him and where I think he can actually be useful. But I mean, like the blocking does need to improve, and he's another guy I would have liked to see take another year and try to put more together. But we got to evaluate him now. The pencils are down.
I think a lot of these guys are trying to get into the draft and get if I can get one more round of money, like raise, I'll just go now. Then wait in 2027, and then like, well, now I got receivers pushing me down. Now I got more running backs
Yeah,
pushing me down the draft board. So that's I think that's their gamesmanship, which I think is just very short term thinking and not very long term. Like, well, what if you just got better and then have a really good overall career and not just worry about where you're going to be drafted right now, but because like to me that's like counting your eggs before they're hatched. Two quick ones here before we get out here. Dallin Bentley, excuse me. I should know that for Dallin Holker from CSU. Shout out to him. Um, RIP actually, because I thought he would be something. Well, what's your quick pitch for him? I did not rank him at all. This is um, the you and I. This is our first time I'm even like really talking about him, and I have one that you didn't rank at all either. Coming up right after that, Utah guy. They Utah likes a type, so I'm assuming he's that type. So
Yeah, yeah. I
mhm.
mean, besides that time when they had Brant Keithy and Dalton Kincaid, they have a
Yep,
type.
yep.
Um, he is the type. But, I mean, he tested really well. He's explosive, he's fast, productive. I can just kinda see him being almost like an AJ Barner type where he blocks at a well, I mean, this is a little bit more hypothetical. I think it's a reasonable one because he's very big, like 6'4", 260, which is rocked up for 6'4". Um, they didn't really use him in line that much for kind of a weird reason, which is that, like, they used an extra tackle as their tight end really consistently because they just didn't even bother. Like, they just didn't even bother trying to spread the field. They were on borderline service academy with passing last year, so that's gonna push a guy like him into the move role because you're not gonna compete with a 300-pound
Mhm,
tackle, which is totally fair. So I think he'll probably have to develop the technique in line at the NFL, but like, he's big and strong. I could definitely see him doing that, and then him being another one of those guys that does a little bit for you against zones, does a little bit for you, um, as a chunk threat on play action, just on those deep sails, deep overs, all that kinda stuff, where
mhm,
you just, leak that guy behind the linebackers. And that can be it's a similar case to Wright, where I think that kinda guy is a starting Y who fulfills that inline blocking without forcing you to basically take an eligible receiver off the field with a John Bates or um, like a Charlie Kohler. So that's the case for him. Again, productive in an offense that's not high volume. So I always look at that as something that's interesting because as we see with Oscar Delp, like you might not be. Um, you might not be. And we saw with sorts, we saw that with guys like George Kittle and plenty of others. So that's the case for Bentley. It's not like I'm not like pounding the table here. I just think, especially since I think he is actually 25, which it's just like is what it is. But yeah, look, I'm not again like I said, I'm not pounding the table here, but I think that these are the guys you kind of don't really think about now because you're thinking about what they do as pure receivers, but these are the types that offensive coordinators end up turning into starters.
mhm. My big one, Marlon Klein from Michigan. I feel about him like you do about Oscar Delp from Georgia, and maybe just like a very poor man's version. There's no production, but he was open a lot. He moves well. Hasn't played tight end very long. He's from Germany. Bryce Underwood, real spotty game. And I don't mean to helmet scout too much, but Michigan, they put out good tight ends, and they're like Iowa and how they coach. They put out really rounded guys, and they scout these athletic movers who can also block. So he's someone that wouldn't be surprised goes like fifth or sixth round, but we end up talking about him as someone who's going to be a useful contributor to an NFL team. So,
Yeah, I mean, maybe like with him, it's so interesting because you've seen the first game of the season, right?
mhm.
That they had. He looked like a first round pick in that game. It
Yes,
was, it was
yes,
he totally did. Um, and I think he had a
yes,
foot
he
or
did.
ankle thing this year, which is like, which pissed me off so much because like I was so excited after that game. I was like, this is a dude. This is somebody I'm going to pound the table for because he's big. He can play this position, and guess what? He's got fluidity, quickness, and some freak athleticism. Like this might be a real guy. And the injury, it clearly impacted him the rest of the year, like very clearly. And now we don't have any reason to believe he's not that guy that we saw week 1, but, like, what is he? We didn't see more of it where it's just like, "Here it is, it's proven." Um, so I don't really think that there's any reason not to think that he can be that guy, 'cause, like, I see it too. You like, especially that first game. Um,
Mhm.
how much am I willing to draft a guy on 1 game and then an injury hypothetical? I don't know. But, I mean, you still saw flashes of it the rest of the year, but it was just obviously impacted by the ankle. Um, but, like, that becomes an athletic flyer on a guy who is still learning the position, but is older, and it's just so unfortunate that that happened. It really is, because I think he was about to break out, so I definitely see it too. I just don't know how much I'm willing to bank on it.
Well, that's the thing about him is that, like, both from the NFL perspective and if you wanna talk about fantasy, he is that sleeper to where he's gonna be going day 3, you know?
Yeah,
That's the kinda bet you wanna make is on a day 3 guy like Marlon
that's true.
Klein,
Yeah,
he's
you're so right.
yeah, where it's just like what you're saying, like, I'm willing to fill in blanks 5th or 6th round. Kenny Sadiq filling in blanks 1st round, that's when the biscuit becomes a little bit, too expensive to risk it with. But that's why he is kind of a sleeper for me, and I'm very interested in where he lands at. But that'll do it for us, guys. Those were 10 tight ends. We got into it. That was a full hour. Max, you're over at Reception Perception with Matt Harmon. You're charting tight ends over there. You've got your Substack. Remember the tight end. You anywhere else I'm forgetting?
Yeah, I do some work for, Bengals Talk on SI, um, and I'm contributing to the Badlands Draft Guide, for the Jets, uh, which I get now that my charting has been my evaluation period for that, so I'm just gonna spam write those in this week. Um, but yeah, I mean, that's pretty much where I'm at. You can find anything I do on my Twitter at Max Toscano1, but, yeah, that's pretty much gonna do it for that.
Awesome, man. A joy having you. Thank you so much. As always, folks, it's me, Jagger May. That's Max Toscano. Love you guys, and we'll see you next time.